am an expert with Notability. But what I have done this year for the first 2 months or 2+ months of the school year, I made a decision early on to jump onto Notability and use it with my students. We actually took our physical notebooks and kind of tossed them out the door, and with the idea that I told kids that if they would prefer to take notes on physical paper and then scan the document of their notes in and put it in Notability, they could do that. But a majority of my students, I'd say 90% or more, are using Notability on a daily basis to take notes and to drop assignments and so on and so forth into Notability. So if you don't know a ton about Notability, like some of the basic things, like the differences between a divider and a subject, or how to simply upload a document, things like that. We'll talk about some of those things, but we're not going to talk about some of the really basic things. I am going to share with you today some different ways that I use Notability, some more advanced features. And I use that term advanced very lightly because, again, I'm not like a super advanced, highly expert with Notability. But I am going to share my screen and hopefully yesterday I shared my screen and then I wasn't sharing it correctly, so hopefully we're better today. So let's see if I can do this. There we go. Can you guys see my iPad screen?
Looks good. Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. So just like anything, Megan is kind of co-hosting this with me. She will be monitoring the chat and kind of admitting people into the room if there are people that continue to join. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those into the chat, and we'll either talk about those kind of if she interjects and wants me to talk about something specifically, I certainly can. Otherwise, we can kind of wait until the end to go through some questions about different things that you guys might be curious about, or just asking questions about my experience and or Megan's experience of using Notability with students. So first and foremost, I'll kind of show you what my Notability notebook looks like. And this is it. So you can kind of see here that I made a decision early on to have a separate notebook for each of my periods for both Group A and Group B. So on the left side, you can kind of see I have Earth Science period 2, 3, 5, 7, 8 for Group A and period 2, 3, 5, 7, 8 for Group B. And I chose this because we all know that not every class goes or moves at the same speed. So rather than starting over and erasing things and doing it again, I was able to just kind of have a stopping point for each individual group each day, which was really helpful for me. So right, like within my Unit 2 Minerals folder that you can kind of see here, I have, this is really pretty much the landing spot for everything that we do that would have originally been paper-based. I have the ability to have them drop or import in different things like homework. So we did a cookie mining lab last week. We've done some practice with mineral identification. We did a mini lab. And then we also have taken notes and things like that. So this is just a perfect landing spot. It's actually really great for organizational purposes because rather than having them slip pieces of paper into a folder and then those papers fall out and then they lose something, everything is just right here. So that's been probably one of my favorite things and favorite reasons for using Notability and kind of happy with my decision early on to do this. But let's jump into a note here. I'll jump into my mineral properties 5 through 8 notes for my second period. And you can kind of see that I've really, one thing that I've loved probably more than anything about Notability this year has been how creative it allows students to be with their notes. That's not saying that they couldn't be creative with paper in a notebook, but they have so much more at their fingertips than they ever have before as far as note-taking goes. So talking about just the ability from the top, right, they have the ability to draw some quick text boxes. They have the ability to color and change the color, change the width. I haven't done this yet, but they have the ability to do favorites. So they can choose their very favorite pens, their very favorite highlighters, their very favorite way of erasing something and add those to their favorites, and then they actually just end up being kind of over here on the side. They can put like their favorites right there, or they can put their favorites on the bottom or on the side over here, so they don't have to constantly go back and forth up top. So you've got your highlighters, you got your eraser, and so on and so forth. So one kind of new feature that was added recently, a lot of what I've learned has come from me watching videos, honestly, on YouTube, and then actually using it with my kids. So one gripe that I can show you really quickly that was actually just recently added was this eraser. So it used to just be whole. So like if you're using the whole eraser, if I just go over the top of this, it gets rid of like whole individual things. Like I just have to go over the top of it. And people hated that because a lot of kids will use this for drawing purposes, and they'll draw different pictures. And if they have this really complex picture they've drawn, then it erases the whole thing. So a new added feature recently was the partial, and now they actually just have the ability to just get rid of things like that. So I just wanted to point that out. Not that that's super awesome by any means, but you can kind of see that within my notes, I have used pictures, and I have diagrams. So I have the Mohs hardness scale, and I have pictures of fingernails, pennies, streak plates. So I have really pushed forward and pushed hard with my students to use the split screen mode to bring in these pictures, because especially within science is very heavily concept driven, right? So there's lots of new vocab words all the time that we share with kids. And I do know just from my previous experience of working, especially with students, ELL students or special ed students as well, that pictures certainly help with the learning process. So I've really pushed my kids to use pictures and to pull pictures in whenever they deem it necessary. So how to get into split screen mode, and I've taught my students this already. So a lot of students do know how to do this, but for your sake, if you swipe from the bottom, and you got to be, it's kind of touchy feely here. So you can't swipe really fast, right? Or you're going to go into this mode where you'll go into kind of your multitasking. Okay, so you have to swipe up kind of slow from the bottom, so you get your dock up here, and then I'm just going to long hold on my Safari till it kind of pulses at me, and then I can move this to either side. I could drop it right here, and this is kind of like a pseudo split screen, or I could go into actual split screen, or I could drop it over here and do the same thing. So I'm going to show you just like how I like to do this, because I want my notes always to stay big. Okay, I want my kids' notes to stay big. So I'm actually going to go into what I'd call kind of like a pseudo split screen. So I have the ability now to go to Google. I can go to images. I can look up something I might want to. So Mohs hardness scale diagram. So I could look that up. And here's a different one, or here's one. I think I brought that one in. Here, we'll do this one. So Mohs hardness scale. Let's say I want to bring this onto the screen. I can just long hold on this picture, and then again it kind of pulses at you, and then that tells you can bring it in. So I'm just going to drop it right there. If I want to move my split screen, I want to move this off to the side, I can just push it off to the side. It actually just gets hidden, so it's not going away. So at any time, I can just swipe from the right side of the screen back on, and then it's back on. But then as far as like modifying this picture, I can either use the scissors or the text tool, right? And that will allow me to modify this and make it smaller and move it around. So now I can make it smaller. I can move it around, and let's say I just wanted to put it right on top of this one, and I could just drop it right there. Okay, so that's something, and the kids have really loved this. They've loved having the ability to pull pictures in. Again, so if I wanted to go and do something different, and I want to look up, but let's say we're talking again, we're not videos. If I want to do something like I want to do Galena. So I could pull in something like this, and we would have a picture of Galena that I could pull in, and I could modify again. Okay. Now, if I want to go into true split screen mode, you'll notice that right above the word Galena, there's like a little gray line. So if I kind of touch that, I get this back into that blurry mode, and then I could go all the way to the right side and I can open up split screen mode. So it works exactly the same way. I can, again, long hold on this picture and bring it in. The only thing I don't like about this is, as you can see, now my notes on the left side have gotten a little bit smaller, so kids would have to, zoom in more if they're going to try to write something down. But they could take that little bar in the middle and move it off to the side just a little bit, maybe go 3/4 of the screen their notes and 1/4 of the screen as their split screen pictures. Okay. If you want to get rid of split screen or go out of split screen mode, very simple. You just take that bar again in the middle, that little gray up and down bar, and I'm just gonna go off of the screen. Okay.
Scott, can I interject something quickly?
Absolutely.
So if you guys are playing with this right now, or if your students are putting pictures into Notability and they're saying, I can't move it, I can't resize it, I can't do anything with it, you just need to make sure that one of your tools is highlighted. So Scott, if you want to show them the tool again up there.
Yep. So you either have to do, just from what I know, you either have to do the scissors tool or you have to do the text tool at the top. So either one of those, if you have it selected, I can now touch the picture I want to move or resize around the corners. I could enable a caption, put a caption underneath, or disable that, and then I can move it around. As you can see, if I'm on the pencil tool or the pen tool, I can't move it. It moves my screen, or if I'm using my pen, it will just write over the top of it. All right, so I have to either have the text tool or the scissors tool to be able to move that thing. Okay.
Okay. And then we do have a question, which is on the agenda to answer later, so you might want to wait till later, but it's talking about doing a split screen of the same app, so doing Notability within Notability.
Perfect. Well, I mean, I think we're done with the split screen. Unless anyone has other questions, again, we can come back to this and I can show you the split screen again as far as using Safari for picture purposes and things like that. But that's a great question. I saw that came from Sarah. So Sarah, wonderful question. That split screen within Notability. And this is something that I actually just learned. My students taught me this. I did not know that this was a possibility until last week. And I find that it's pretty awesome. So let's say, for example, last week we were working on a cookie mining lab in science. And it's a lab I was very happy to be able to do because it gave the kids, it was actually one of those engaging hands-on activities. Usually we do it in small groups, but they had to do it independently, but that was okay. So they got two things. They needed, they got their lab, so open up their lab. So this is the lab that they had to do. And I'll just get rid of some of this stuff. So they had to put together this business ledger. And then at the very bottom, after they kind of calculated their profit or loss, however much money they either profited or lost in the mining process, they then had to reflect on these questions. And you can kind of see right here that it talks about the different types of mining and kind of the advantages and disadvantages of both types. Well, they might not, again, there's still, this is in the beginning stages of learning about mining and whatnot and the differences between surface and subsurface, but we did take notes the previous day. So if I want to bring those notes up, I can do that within the same screen. So from the left side of the screen, if I kind of start off of the screen and then go on, I can open up the note switcher. So you can see that it shows that I'm already in my cookie mining lab. And I want to bring on my mining and the uses of minerals notes because that's where we took notes about mining. So I can either touch those three little circles, those three little dots, and I can say view on left or view on right. So that will open it up to whichever side you want. Or I can simply just click and long drag and hold, and then I can open that up. Okay, so I have the ability now to move in on some of my notes here on surface mining and subsurface mining, and then use that to help me in filling out my table. Now, one thing that I learned yesterday was right now I can only write on the left side of the screen because that was the second note that I opened up. Okay, so let's say I want to write on the right side of my screen, it won't let me. It just moves it up and down. So what I would have to do is whichever document you want to write on, you have to open up second. So I would have to go out, find my mining the uses of minerals notes. Let me do this. Okay. So I would want to be on this first, and then I would want to open up my cookie mining lab. Oh, I did that terribly. Sorry, everybody. Let's see here. Where are my notes? There we go. So I'd want to do this, and then I'd want to bring up my cookie mining lab and then push it on the right side. So now I can look at my notes and I can actually write on the screen here as I fill those out. So I can't actually write on the left side, but I can now write on the right side because I opened that up second. So that was something that I learned while doing my presentation yesterday. So very valuable. So if you are someone who wants the students to do a reading and they're looking for specific things, I think, Megan, you mentioned something like this to me. Did you use something like this recently where you needed the kids to find something in a reading?
Yep. So they had their short story that they had already annotated, but they needed to use that to answer questions on a separate worksheet. So they had both open at the same time.
Okay. So very helpful, rather than having to go, back and forth, like go out, find your other thing, go into it, and then go back out and go, right? No need to go back and forth when you don't have to. So let's save some time and be more efficient with the use of the technology we have at our fingertips. So, so that's kind of the two things, kind of two advanced features as far as split screening. So either with Safari and being able to pull pictures, you can split screen other things too, right? You don't have to just split screen Safari. You could split screen something else. So Schoology, you could split screen. I'm sure a couple of, if YouTube even, if they're watching a video and they need to fill something out, I'm sure you could have them do that same thing as well. So moving on to kind of importing documents. Now, what I have told my students, and I think anyone that's used Notability before, it's a lot easier to import documents and import them into Notability if the student is using the actual app. So what I tell my students is that they should use kind of an app to app. So think app to app. Notability is an app, and there's a Schoology app, right? The white background one. So that's how I want them. 95% of the time, I want them to go app to app. But there's still, to this day, even though we've been using this for 2 months, there are still kids who attempt to import documents into Notability from the browser app, right? The black Schoology app. So let's say they do that. Okay, let's say they do that. They go to Schoology and they're on the browser. I want to show you some issues that kids will run into if they don't know how to properly do it, because you can import from the browser app, but it's just a little bit less intuitive, I guess. So I've created just a quick kind of practice folder within my homeroom folder. So Notability practice. So for example, if I wanted to bring that business ledger in, right? So we're working on the cookie mining lab, and I want that to be brought into Notability. I can. The kid would typically just touch that PDF, and it would load, and they would see, oh, perfect. This is exactly what Mr. Lipsick needs me to bring in. Awesome. So they would then go to the upper right-hand corner, and they see the little Cheryl, right, the little box that has the arrow pointing out of it. So this one right here, they would touch that one, and they would follow those instructions, right, that we've taught them. So to click on Notability, they click on Notability, and then they don't pay attention to what's on the screen. So you'll notice here that it actually shows me a quick view of what I'm actually bringing into Notability, and it says one account, all of Google. Well, that's certainly not my business ledger. So they wouldn't look at that. They would hit create new note. They would title it what they want to title it, and then they would import it. So that's certainly not something we want to do. So instead, if they actually go through this app, they have to go to the bottom, and where they see this little PDF icon next to Cookie Mining Lab, they would actually have to open it up, and then they would have to click on the little share arrow button up in the right-hand corner. Now they click that, they choose Notability, and now you can see right there that it is the proper business ledger that they need to bring in. So now they could click create new note. They could, I'll just, for today's purpose, I'll send it to my unfiled notes. They have it named, and I would just import that. Okay. And then I usually always have them double check. So let's go back into Notability. We'll go into my unfiled notes, and I have my Cookie and Mining Lab business ledger. Okay, so that is a possibility. So I usually, again, I continue to push on my students, like, let's use the app. Again, 95% of the time, we're going to be using the Schoology app and Notability to import and submit assignments. Okay, so that's something that we want to make sure that we do. So that was that. Another thing that people might run into, especially as we move to distance learning, maybe you have multiple PDFs that you want to turn into one note, okay? But you don't want to take the time to recreate it. So you don't want to have to go back to Google Docs, type everything up, and make one document and then download it and save it as a PDF, okay? If we had tons of time, that might be the best way to do it, but we don't always have time. So if you so happen to have a couple of PDFs that you want students to fill out and you want them to be submitted as one note, you can do that, okay? And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let me go back to my Schoology app here. I'm going to go to my homeroom page. I'll go into this Notability practice. So let's say, for example, I want the students to learn about independent versus dependent variables, and then I want them to work on some scenarios. And I want this to be submitted to me as an assignment. But I don't want it to be two separate assignments, okay? So what I would do first is I would have them open up the scientific method, independent versus dependent variables. That's the first thing I want them to work on, or the first part of the note or assignment. So I would open this up. I would hit the little share button in the upper right-hand corner. Again, choose Notability. And I am just going to hit Create New Note. Perfect. I could name it if I want to. So, Sci method, independent versus dependent variable. Okay, so I can name that. And I'm going to import that. Okay, perfect. So let me go back in. Let me just make sure that it transferred over here to Notability. And let me say unfiled. So here we go. Where is it? Sci method, right here. Sci method, independent versus dependent variables. Okay, so right now you can see that it's just one piece of paper, and then it's the lines, right? It's the rest of their notebook underneath that. So again, let's say I want them to work on that first, but then I also want, within that same note, I want there to be another set of worksheets that they would just continue on doing. So I would go back to my Schoology, and I would open up this scenarios worksheet that I want them to work on. So this one is actually 3 pages long, okay? And I would just import the same way. But this time, instead of creating a new note, I'm going to add this to an existing note. So I'm going to add this, and I want to add this to the Sci method, independent versus dependent variable, right? So I would just click on that, and I hit Next. And now it's going to be a part of that note. So I'm just going to import that, all of those pages. And now you'll notice that when I go back to Notability, if I go back into this Sci method, independent versus dependent variable, that I have not only that, now instead of the notebook, it has my read and write handout, and then they can work on these scenarios, and they can work on identifying different things like variables and stating the problem and working on a hypothesis and so on and so forth. So it's not something that I've ever used with my students, but again, just for sake of time, if you are someone that needs something, you don't have time to recreate something, you have the PDFs already, but you can't go back and combine them into one, or you don't know how to combine them into one, this is kind of the next best way, because kids can work through this and then just submit this activity to me on Schoology. So, anything to add, Megan, about anything so far? Or any questions that we can kind of stop and pause and go back to?
There are no questions in the chat, and I'm assuming you're going to talk about the next things I have on my mind next, so I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, okay. Well, so that's kind of it as far as like screening and importing. For some odd reason, and I think Meg, yesterday, did I show how to like submit an assignment?
Yeah, and that's, I think, watching that connection between how this is going to work with Schoology would be helpful.
Yeah, so I don't know why it does this. If you notice that if I open up this Cookie Mining Lab, see in the upper left-hand corner where the share usually is? It's on those two little, it's like that. So I don't know why, so it actually won't allow me to show anyone right now how to submit an assignment. What if I hit presentation? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. So I don't know. I could attend. I guess we'll talk about some other things and see if I can figure that out here as we go along. So a couple of other things that we can touch base on, just some of the tools. Okay, some of the tools, because you can kind of see within, say, my notes here, you can kind of see how I've got like this drop shadow and things like that. Or let's say, for example, I want to move something around, right? I write something and I want to move it. I can use the scissors tool. This is a really helpful tool. It actually, so for example, if I want to do something with everyday tools here, I want to move this to a different spot, or I want to turn it or rotate it, whatever I might want to do, I can just draw a circle around it. And it kind of has this like moving moving lines. And then I can move it. I can make it bigger if I wanted to. I could make it smaller. I could rotate it. Okay, I'm just using my fingers to do this. So I could just move it like that. I could change the color of it if I want to. I could change it to pink or blue. Or I could even, and then to get this like little menu, that's all I have to do is touch it, right? So I would draw a box around it, and then I just touch the box, and it brings up this little menu here. I could duplicate it, and this is actually how I do. Sometimes if I want students to highlight a word that is more important for them to remember, I'll have them duplicate it and then change the style to a different color, and then actually drag this right over the top, so it has a kind of a little bit of that drop, that backdrop, okay, or that shadow behind it, and that way it just kind of pops a little bit more on the screen than it did prior. Okay, so that's kind of the tool there for the scissors. Another thing
Scott,
that
will you do?
Yeah.
Sorry, will you do a convert to text?
I always forget that one. I don't use that one very often, so
I think it's nice for students that are pretty messy, or if they're slow typers.
Sure. Absolutely. So yeah, maybe they're slow typers, but they can write quickly, but they're messy. You can just again use the scissors tool. You can highlight. Okay. I can touch this, and it says right here next to copy, it says convert to text. So I can click on that. It'll pop up. So here's what I don't know, Megan. If this happened, this says evening day yay tools, right? Can I change that? I can't. Look at that. So I would just go in and make a change. Clearly my writing is very messy. Here we'll do everyday tools, and then convert selection, and then it would change that to everyday tools. And then here I could just highlight everything, and I could make it smaller. Again, down here on the bottom, I could change the font. I could change to this, and then I can just move it around, and I can put this right there, so if I wanted to. So that's kind of a cool feature. I don't use that often, but again, like Megan said, it is a great tool to use if kids are messy or they're slow typers, but they're fast writers. They could definitely write it out and then highlight the whole thing and use the ability of Notability to convert that to text. Okay. Staying within the notes, if in the upper right-hand corner, one thing I also like about it is the fact that students have the ability to kind of customize their sheet of paper. I know that when I'm taking notes, if I don't have lines, I would not be writing perfectly straight across. Okay, so I think that's pretty normal for most people. So in the upper right-hand corner, there's those three little dots here. You can choose paper, and they can then choose kind of whatever type of paper and whatever color background that they want. So they could do, little wider lines. They could do graph paper if they want. They could use even dots. Okay, and just something to kind of help them guide be guided towards writing straight if that's what they would prefer, or they could just go straight nothing, right? They could just have an empty background. Again, you can change the color, so you can really customize the back here. Now, one thing that Megan has ran into, and other teachers I would assume have ran into, is if for some reason, and maybe it would be easier for me to go out and show this, let's say they keep it on white and they have no lines at all, okay? Let me just create a new note here and show this. Okay, so if they choose to have their paper be a little bit darker, if they do this and they want to write in, this, and then they end up writing in like a white color, right? So they're writing in a white color. And again, Megan, this isn't really going to work for me to show because I have that little thing in the upper right hand corner that's not. I don't understand.
There was a suggestion in the chat. I don't know if this will work. Saying to share, you have to be in the black browser. Schoology, but I don't know. I'm not sure why that's doing that for you today.
Yeah, because it didn't yesterday. So I'll try my best to explain. So if you have a white text, right, and when you are trying to submit an assignment, they in the upper left hand corner, right here, typically, right, they would have a little box that would look like this that has the arrow pointing out like that. Okay. If I click on that, right, then the students would choose other apps, and then it would bring up a menu, and it says paper, and they can toggle that on and off. And if they have that off, then what happens is it would actually remove the purple dotted background and the lines, and it would only provide or bring their text with them, whatever they are writing. So being that if I wrote, if we're talking about minerals, and I'm writing in white, so minerals, then would be, that would come in, would look as if there's nothing on the page because everything in the background is gone, right? The purple background's gone, the lines are gone, and I was writing in white text. So sometimes, again, that doesn't happen a lot, but I think, Megan, you've ran into that a couple times, and I know even Mrs. Gordon in 6th grade science has ran into that where students submit something and then nothing's there, but it's because they were writing with white font and they didn't have the paper toggled on.
Yes. Yeah. Scott, I'm thinking the only difference between yesterday's presentation and today's is that I was the host yesterday, and today you are, and I don't know if that has something to do with your sharing button not sharing.
Well, I think I can make you.
Or we were in my room, I should say.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I mean, for today's sake, we can't show that. So if but I'm hoping that people maybe know how to do that, or I could certainly put together a step-by-step instructions on how to share something. So let's see, anything else? The only other thing that I actually have on my list to share with you guys today is this little zoom feature in the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see a little magnifying glass. Especially early on when students were still trying to figure out how to best take notes and whether they like to type or like to write, or maybe they have a stylus. I have a few kids who have an actual Apple Pencil, and some kids that just have your basic kind of rubber-tipped stylus. I told the kids to use this little feature in the bottom right-hand corner, which really you can kind of see as I move this little box around. It's magnified on the bottom. So if students are trying to be really precise with their writing, they have to write, within the lines, then they can easily, if we're talking about, oh my goodness, that's really thick. So we'll go like this. If we wanted to talk about mineral properties, okay, and you can kind of see that over here, right there, it's like a little kind of darker blue, or darker purple. But anytime that I reach that, it actually is going to move. So I could just keep writing. So if I'm journaling, or if I'm writing notes, as soon as I get to the end, it's just going to keep moving that with me, which is actually really nice. and then again I could keep going, and it just kind of follows me along. It just helps kids be a little bit more precise with their writing, and at least until they get really a little bit better with it. I have a lot of students that don't like to use that, and they'll just zoom in nice and close, and then they can just write right on the screen, and that's totally fine. They just have to physically move it rather than the box moving with them. So, yeah, that's kind of the last thing that I have.
Sorry, Scott. Two things. Will you do the disconnect of the Apple Pencil?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And then also, would you be able to pull up Schoology and show what that looks like for submitting an assignment?
Sure. Yep. Okay. So every so often I've run into the issue, and maybe you have too, where students can't write. They can't choose if they typically write with their fingers. They choose, say, orange, and they can't write. It actually does what it does right now with my screen. I'm trying to write with my finger, and obviously that doesn't work because I have my Apple Pencil. But maybe a friend of theirs used their Apple Pencil, or if they have one of those capacitive pens that they can buy, kind of the off-brand, the $11.50 to $20 brand. If they use that on their device, then what happens is the iPad recognizes that as not their finger. So sometimes they actually have to disconnect that Apple Pencil. It kind of comes in and says that it's an Apple Pencil. So if you ever run into this happening with a student, you just have to click on the little three arrows, or the little three dots, in the upper right-hand corner, and then choose Info. And then you'll notice here at the very bottom it says Apple Pencil Disconnect. So I've had this happen where students, they don't even have an Apple Pencil. They're just using their finger, and it says and then they can't write. We just have them go to that Options tab, or that, this Options section, and then they just choose Disconnect, and then they're able to write again. Okay. Now there have been other times where we've done this and it hasn't worked. So I have actually just had them delete the app, and then reinstall it from self-service. If that happens and you have issues and students need to delete the app, the one thing you want to make sure of for that particular student is to make sure that they have everything backed up. Okay. So there is a little gear down in the bottom left-hand corner. If I touch that gear, you just have to make sure that if students have never been to this area, it'll actually have a little check mark next to turn backup off. And we want to make sure that they are protected, so that if something goes wrong with Notability, and they have to delete the app, or let's say disk it, right? They put a ticket in, and disk it runs a complete. They wipe everything clean, and then they load things back on. That when students go back into Notability, that they have their notes. Okay, a lot of students have worked really hard at getting a lot of stuff imported into Notability, so we don't want them to lose that stuff. So all they'll have to do is touch next to Google Drive, or just touch Google Drive, and it'll ask them for their credentials of their school's Gmail. They just type that stuff in, and then they're protected. Now, the district has said, well, we don't really have to do that because Icloud is on. Icloud syncing should be on. But I do know, just talking with a couple of our tech people here at Kenwood, that there have been some issues with Icloud. So I'm like, you know what? Let's have double protection then. Let's turn on the auto backup for both Icloud and have auto backup for Google Drive, and let's just be double protected. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. So now, as far as Schoology goes, right? For a Schoology assignment, Megan, which one do you think it would be better to show in? Maybe in the browser app, or should I can show both, but I'll start with the browser app. Okay. So if you want to create an assignment where students will have kind of a landing spot for them to get and import the assignment, as well as submit it to, you'd want to go, and let me just see if I can find, I think it was week 9 for me. We had the cookie mining lab, which I've kind of been referring to here, which was on Tuesday. So we have the cookie mining lab. So the way I did this, right, is you just go to add materials and you choose an assignment. Hold on for 1 second.
Jules Tinkle, if you're in the building, call me at 3801. Jules Tinkle, 3801, please.
Okay. So So you just go to the add materials and choose assignment, and then so I'm just going to click on this, and you kind of see that when I created this, right, I just kind of put in a description of what they're going to be working on, and then I actually attached these documents to the assignment. Okay, now I actually learned this from Megan because I was doing it a completely I wouldn't say in a wrong way, but just a much less efficient way. I created the assignment as a place for them to drop it, but I didn't attach their PDFs to the actual assignment. So so the kids, like the PDFs were actually outside of the assignment. So this is much nicer. If I actually show you the edited version, so like where I set things up, you'll kind of see here that so I have my instructions, I have of kind of what I want them to do, maybe when it's due, and then I just was able to click like right there, and I could add a file, and then that's where I found my PDFs, and that way that just everything's in one spot. I went through, I added some points, what kind of thing, when it's due, and then I just did those. Okay, and then it pops in this. What does this look like on the Schoology app? Well, if I go in here, I'll go to Earth Science, Week 9, Group A, Tuesday. So it looks very similar, but instead of having the PDFs on the bottom, they actually are right up here on the top left where it says View Attachments. So I would prefer, again, that they're using the app to import both the instructions and the business ledger into Notability. It's just much easier, right? So they would just click on the ledger, and then they would just go through the sharing, the steps to bring that in. Okay. Let's see here. And then when they're done, and I can't really show this again because of the presentation mode that Schoology has me in right now. But as soon as they're done, right, they would actually click right there to share their assignment. They would choose other apps. They would hit share, and then they would find Schoology. They'd find the white Schoology app. They click on that, and then that would take them to. It says a spot that says submit to assignments. They would just touch that, find the class that they're in. So in this case, it would be science, or if it was with Megan, it would be English or whatever it might be. And then naming your assignments is really important. So have a purpose for how you name your assignments, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have students that get lost because your assignment is named differently than, like, say, the lab that you're working on. So I want to make sure everything is named the same. So Cookie Mining Lab, Cookie Mining Lab, Cookie Mining Lab, so they know exactly that they just need to touch that one and hit import. And then what does it look like when they submit it? You can kind of see here on the right side, I can see, Caden, Samantha, Maya, Kelsey, Anthony, Callie, they've all submitted this. It tells me if they've submitted it late. It tells me if I haven't graded it yet. And then I can toggle here between different classes and stuff like that. So it's really efficient. It's really easy. I get an email all the time when someone has submitted something, which just allows me to make a mental note or write it down that, hey, I need to go grade this thing, and then get this into the grade book. So I also have the ability, if I click on this, it's a nice thing here too is that I can see their work. So in this case, I can see all of the different things that they did. They did their business ledger, and then they did some work below. I can read through that. I can then have the ability to add a grade up top. I can add a comment over here on the side. That's my only downfall is I think right now, especially working from a distance, it's super important to provide enough feedback, right? I mean, typically we would sometimes give feedback in class with things that people have submitted or whole classes have submitted. I do think it's important, especially now, to provide feedback, but there's just, I don't think, it says show to students, so I'd click on that, but I don't think it notifies them in a really big way. It says, hey, you should go check out this comment from your teacher. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing. So I don't know if your feedback actually sometimes more than less gets lost because it's not a big thing. So I wish that there was a little bit more feedback that we could provide or a way to get that feedback to the students. So so I mean that's actually all that I have as far as on my list of things. I know that if I check the chat here, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. I know Chris has been a very active participant and chat person today. So he said he dropped a video that he shared with his students. I have that as well. I've created my own video on Loom. It's about a minute long. I showed students how to go from the Schoology app to import it into Notability, and then I just leave that. I have that forever on my materials page, and then I have another video too. It's about a minute long of how to submit an assignment. So I just keep those there in case students forget how to do that. So that's a great idea, Chris, and thank you for sharing that.
Grace, did your question get answered?
No, I have been playing with it this whole time that I've been watching you guys, and it's like for some reason my submissions, like it just says submissions and nothing pops up, and I've like tried it a gazillion times different ways. So I'll keep putzing with it. I totally get how to do it. I just like isn't working for some reason. So I feel like I'm just missing something little.
Do you have a due date entered?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
I'll keep thinking about it too. I don't know.
I'll keep look. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks.
Grace, are you at school today?
No, I'm at home.
Okay.
So Scott, the question I had, I guess it doesn't really have to do with Notability, so I'm not sure if it's, appropriate here, but what I'm wondering is sometimes I have the Schoology app open and I want to split screen with the Schoology app so I can have the assignment on one side and then like the reading on the other. But if you try to drag up the Schoology app, if you already have it open, it just disappears. And we could do the web Schoology version, but sometimes you just want to have the app open twice, and I can't figure out how to do that.
See, I don't know. I'm echoing again. Dang it. This is terrible. So let me share my QuickTime player again. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, good. So I don't think that, right, so like I guess so certain apps probably can go split screen mode, two things, like let me see, like for example Safari, right? If I open Safari and I go to Google and then I swipe up again and I open Safari, and so I can do, right, because you can essentially have two browsers open, but I don't think that, because I'm just guessing that. So I'm guessing this is what you run into, right? If I have something open in the Schoology app and then I do this, it doesn't let me, right? So that just tells me I can't have two of these apps open at the same time.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
Just so you know, I kind of asked my students one time, like how they would, like let's say we do a guided reading class, right? So I want them to have the book assignment open, like the PDF on one side, and their Schoology quiz on the other. A lot of students were telling me that they were doing kind of what you had suggested, which was having the black Schoology app open on one side, and then the white Schoology app with the assignment, the quiz on the other side.
Right. Yeah. I guess you just have to make sure that you have to have the right one open, because if they're trying to submit it to Notability, they'd have to make sure it's the app one, right?
I'm trying. Yeah, I mean, so because if they're trying to import it to Notability, like I said before, you can import using both apps, right? The black and the white Schoology app. It's just a little bit more. I think it's a little bit easier to go from the actual Schoology app to import, and that's what I've taught most of my students, or all of my students, how to do. App to app. Yeah, it's a little. I mean, I think it's just a matter of kind of continuing to work with it and seeing like what works best for you and the student that you're working with.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. So let's see here. Jess. Is Jess still here? She leave? No, she's still here. She said, "I like your mineral property analysis. Will you be writing with the students
Yep, I'm
modeling
here.
these?" I'm just reading your comment from before, your question from before. With these mineral property notes, the reason that they probably look so good is because I had a chance to take time because I had the students do like kind of watch. I put together a lecture using Loom and video, and I uploaded that on like an asynchronous day, and they watched it and were supposed to take notes within their Notability, and then I did the same thing because I have a spot on Schoology. If I share again one more time my iPad screen, I have created a spot for my students to go to. So I just have this class notes per unit. So anytime that I have notes, or either we take them in person in class, or if I take them at home and I just need kids to be able to get those notes in case they didn't watch the videos, then they can just go in and they have, so these 4 notes essentially are what they should have in their notebook. And it's really easy. Another thing that I've really liked is if you go to like resources, I created a Notability Notes resource. So anytime that I'm done with a note, I can just upload directly to Schoology, and then I can easily just access that thing and push it into a folder. And it's really, really simple and easy to do that. So.
You want to share those with our science group?
Absolutely. I will definitely pass my notes along to you guys. So.
Just even like, it doesn't have to be all of them, but maybe just a couple so I can get an idea of how you're doing it.
For sure. I take a lot of pride, honestly, in.
I love your mineral notes. They look great.
Yeah, this is like maybe the best notes I've ever taken in my life. Even better than when I was in college and stuff like that. So I just like the flow of it and my arrows and all that kind of, I remember showing this to my students for the first time, and they like their jaws dropped, like, oh my gosh, that's what our notes are supposed to look like. And I'm like, no. I spent a decent amount of time putting these together, so don't feel like yours has to look exactly like this. But I do want them, again, it was a way for me to re-emphasize how pictures can be used within notes.
Yeah.
So rather than just writing fingernail equals 2.5, well, let's put a picture of a fingernail, because why not? It just kind of helps that with that understanding of.
This just reminds me a lot of like, I have a presentation that looks a lot like this, right? With slides that have each of those things.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, if they could create their own notes that look even similar to this, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I didn't show this yesterday, but one thing, I remember the very first time, one thing I had to get used to was one of the first times we ever took notes with Notability. I had a student that was in the back of my classroom, and they were so involved with their iPad. I didn't think that they were taking notes. I thought they were playing a game or whatever. So I kind of just let it go because I wanted to see if they would ever like involve themselves. You're good, Megan. Thank you for hosting. I wanted to see if they would like re-involve themselves with the notes. And then, so the class ended or the bell rang or whatever. And I remember going to the back and she was in Notability. And I was like, I saw her note and I was like, those notes are awesome. Holy cow. Like, can you share those with me? So and this was early on. This was the first time we had ever used notes. And this was the student note. I just thought it was super cool. Again, how like they were able to, the reason that they were so involved was because they were drawing pictures. So instead of like importing pictures or going to Safari and finding pictures from the internet and bringing them in, they were spending a ton of time, zooming in really close and drawing mountaintops and drawing rocks and stuff. And this just goes to show that the ability for students to just be super creative with Notability. And again, not to say that they can't do this on paper in a notebook, because they can.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier and a lot faster to be able to do this on Notability because you don't need a bunch of different colored pencils and different colored pens and highlighters. Everything is right here at their fingertips. So I kind of keep this in my back pocket because I want people to be able to see, like, all kids are capable of doing this. And granted, she just said, I like taking notes with Notability because I have the ability to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a fun thing to see. And ever since, I always check her notes and stuff. I always check her notes to make sure that my notes are up to par. So, let's see here. Anything else from anyone else? Grace, I'd be curious. I'm curious now about your issue about not being able to get things submitted or finding out a way to do that. So, if you don't mind, for everybody else, I have nothing else for you. Although I think I have another meeting at 10:30 that I have to present at. So, so Grace, can we touch base sometime, like either today or the next time you're in school, and I can kind of just take a look at it and help you with that process of submission? All right. Well, Grace, I will touch base with you later. So, I am out of here. I gotta go to another meeting. Thanks so much, everybody, and let me know if you have questions. Linda, are you there?